Let's get started. Welcome. My name is Renee Greenfield. I have the pleasure of being the head of school at the Carroll School, and I get to welcome you tonight for an information session. Just a couple logistics about tonight. We are recording tonight's session so we can share it with folks who may be interested and can't make it tonight. The chat is turned off, but please use the Q&A button if you have questions, and we will try to answer your questions in the context of the presentation. But if we can't do it in the presentation, we will certainly get back to you via email. My colleague Kristen's going to drop that contact email in the chat, so you have that. Just as a reminder, we're going to spend 45 to 50 minutes together tonight in this webinar, and then you're going to log off and join a grade-specific meeting by your rising grade. And this is a breakout room where you can ask questions and hear in more detail about grade-specific information. And again, my colleague Kristen, my amazing colleague Kristen, is going to put the links in the chats. Don't worry if you didn't pre-register. You can certainly do that when you enter the breakout, so not to worry about that. Okay, so everything we do at the Carroll School starts with our mission statement. But before I take you through the mission statement, I do want you to just imagine for a minute that you're on campus with me. We love to host folks on campus. And so imagine if you were on campus, I was on campus today. If you were there, you'd see really happy kids, curious, engaged, alongside teachers who are exceptionally skilled, kids working in small classes or independently or in groups across all divisions, our lower school, our middle school, and upper school. It's such a buzz when you step onto any of our campuses. So tonight, we can't welcome you to campus, but we're going to try to capture some of that buzz so you can feel and understand what a special place our school is. So let's launch with our mission statement. I'm going to read it aloud to you because it is that important to us. And here we go. Carroll School empowers children with language-based learning differences, such as dyslexia, to be academically skilled students who are strong self-advocates and confident lifelong learners. Carroll's an inclusive community committed to embracing diverse strengths, identities, and lived experiences in order to give each child what they most need to thrive. So that's what we do here. I want to take you through what the rest of the webinar is going to entail and introduce some of my colleagues who are going to share with you. Great. So tonight, you are going to hear from my colleague, Stacy Daniels. She's one of our assistant heads of school who oversees and leads admissions and enrollment. And she's going to help you understand our profile, the kids who we serve at Carroll. She's also going to help you understand our small class groupings and how we configure how kids learn together. Then our colleague Allison West, who is the middle school division head, she's going to take you on a journey to better understand brain-based interventions and really help you have a deeper understanding of how we use data to inform progress monitoring and our teaching here at Carroll. Then you'll hear from Deetra Watson, who's our lower school division head. She's going to talk about our educators, both their expertise and their expectations. And Stacy's going to close out the order and share a little bit about how vibrant our community is and the kind of school culture that we have. I do want to give some props on the back end. We have Kristen Curry and Erica Barros from our admissions office, and Amy Dempster and Jen, who are helping back at the house. So thanks to them. Again, Renee Greenfield, head of school, so happy to welcome you here tonight. Please reach out if you have any questions. We're here. Over to you, Stacy.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. We're so happy you're here with us. So what we're here to talk about tonight is, why does this school work? And you're going to hear this refrain over and over, because we give each child what they most need. This is our core belief. This guides every decision that we make about your child or the student you're here to learn more about our environment for. We see this as our only job. It informs every conversation we have with parents, every educator meeting, every decision that we make. So, what makes us qualified to do this? Well, we are experts at teaching this one learner. And we like to say that we have 455 versions of this learner this year. In the next slide, you're going to see me talk in great detail about our profile. And I just want to be clear that I speak in very sort of detailed at times, maybe too detailed, but general terms about the profile. But we are quite mission-centered, and our profile is intentionally narrow because we know we have distinctive capability, some amazing expertise that we've built over the last nearly 60 years of the school in teaching to this one type of learner. So looking ahead, I'd love to take you through the profile. One thing I want to say from the outset is that what the admission team led by Kristen Curry, and you all know Erica Barros, and perhaps Carol Rumpler and Dave Barkin, what they are looking for is a primary diagnosis of a language-based learning challenge. There are a variety of different diagnoses that may show up depending on who did your evaluation. For the purposes of this conversation, I'm going to use the word dyslexia. However, again, many other diagnoses, specific learning disability in reading and writing, and in some cases math, language-based learning challenge, specific learning disability in communication. So again, just for brevity, I'm going to go with dyslexia. So what we're looking for when we read in admission is a combination of different things. Starting with, we look at the cognitive profile, we look at a whole bunch of academic testing, and then we also look at everything that you upload in terms of the parent statement and IEP, if you happen to have one, the recommendation forms, and everything that you take the time to let us know about your child through conversations or emails. This constellation of things we pull together to make sure that we have the programming for your child. One other shorthand, I'm going to use the word your child, but understanding that there's a variety of compositions of kind of families and caregivers, but I'm going with dyslexia and child for the purposes of today. So let's go through the cognitive profile. Many of you, as part of a psychoeducational evaluation from your school or an independent neuropsychological evaluation, have a WISC. It's kind of old school IQ testing. And in this WISC, there are 5 domains. The 3 domains at the top that you see on your screen, the verbal comprehension, the fluid reasoning, and that very last one, and the visual spatial, those comprise the sort of core thinking skills, problem solving skills, kind of intellectual abilities. Those 2 that you see in the 3rd and 4th slot on your screen, the working memory and the processing speed, those are the efficiencies that drive those thinking skills. And I think it's important to understand the architecture of this while I go through the explanation. Again, very generally, the majority of our students have what's called a higher verbal comprehension index than the rest of the scores that we often see. And that sounds a little counterintuitive that our students are talented with language, their vocabulary, they can draw verbal analogies, and they're so fluid at times, even if they struggle with a little word retrieval or they just can't quite put their brain on that, what they were trying to get at, but they're talented linguists. They struggle with the persnickety parts of language around decoding, which is reading, and encoding, which is spelling and writing. Our students also tend to have what's called strong fluid reasoning. That maps very closely with math. So they do kind of a few visual algebra and flipping around some matrices. Again, it tends to be an area of strength for our students. What we often see is some of the areas of challenge that present on the fluency side of the language also present in math. So we do have students who are really talented mathematicians, and we have a really robust math program that can teach to our highest learners, but also teach those learners who may struggle with the math facts or the fluency pieces, and even things like, I'm sure, when you interlace word problems with math, you mean you've taken math and you've added language to it, even more complicated. What we also see in our students, I'm going to jump down to that number 5 slot, is some variability in something called the visual spatial. So this is kind of Legos, block designs, puzzles, all of those things that may one day make someone a really talented engineer or architect or radiologist. What we see is variability actually in that score. For some students, it's their highest score, super area of talent. And for others, they struggle for some of the same reasons that we described, that there are language struggles. The hallmark of our student, what really delineates our students from more traditional learners, is a weaker working memory and or processing speed. So just to drill down on that a little bit, what is a working memory? And it's counterintuitive because it uses the word memory, but it's not exactly memory. It's really kind of a mental workbench of the brain where we, for very small increments of time, store a bit of information that we actually have to put to use real time. This plays out quite prominently in reading. So I'll give you a really simple example, which is sounding out the word cat. So you go, k, ah. And for our learners, what we often find is they'll get the first 2 syllables, they'll get the k, ah, but by the time they get to the t, that mental workbench, they've lost that first sound or perhaps that second sound, which makes sounding out words very complicated and very, very frustrating, especially for our kids who are really intellectual, great problem solvers, great thinkers. To have a jam in the efficiency is, and it is really quite challenging for them. The other area of weakness for our students tends to be, not always, tends to be processing speed. Processing speed, just in simple terms, is our ability to churn information through our brain quickly and efficiently. And one very concrete example I could give is you look around the classroom and an educator has explained something and a whole bunch of hands go up. That processing speed is well developed. Our kids are the ones who hand hasn't quite gotten up. They needed just a little more time to work through what was said. Again, another area of vulnerability and real frustration for our kids. And I can't underscore this enough, is the sort of highly developed kind of intellect and thinking skills and unique solutions of our students. One other thing that we also look at in conjunction with this is the academic testing. And what we often find is that there's a real disparity between these well-developed kind of thinking skills, problem-solving skills, and their ability to perform in a school environment. So the academic testing is much lower than what their cognitive profile suggests that it should be. The other thing that we really are looking for, and this often happens with our middle school or upper school students, some of whom may have remediated themselves out of a dyslexia diagnosis, is a history of phonological struggles. So we can look back at some of the testing, some of the earlier things, and see that the acquisition of language, that the sound symbol correlation didn't come so effortlessly and naturally the way that it did for more typical traditional learners. What we find with our middle and perhaps upper school students is sometimes they've done a lot of memorizing of things with those wonderful memories. And by the time they get to places where these multisyllabic words show up in the curriculum, those strategies the lack of strategy presents itself, right? There, you can't actually memorize all of these words. You need skills and strategies. And so it's important for our students to come and still get the remediation that they need, even though they may be able to read, even though they may be able to perform close to grade level, because their ability to maintain this over time throughout middle school years into high school, it diminishes. It's absolutely essential to shore up the foundation. What we also love to read for in admission, Kristen and her team, is this series of wonderful strengths and talents. Our kids, in your parent statements or achievements that they've had, whether they love Lego robotics, whether they have entrepreneurial spirit, whether they're a great athlete or a great artist or have a wonderful mind for building things. We look for these things because we know that so many of our kids have such resilience and such stamina and have areas of confidence in their profile that help them muscle through the other pieces. And we also know for some of our students that that fire's been burned out. The confidence that was once there is now lost. And it takes a toll. It takes a toll on their self-esteem. It takes a toll on their confidence. Just to kind of circle back to where I started, just to be clear, we are always looking for the language-based challenge to be the primary area of challenge for our students. Some of our students have a co-occurring diagnosis of ADHD. About 60% of our students have a challenge in that area with attention, whether diagnosed or not. Some of our students, especially since the pandemic, may have some anxiety, whether that's school-based or outside of school. Again, the COVID was not a friend to elementary and middle school students and high school students. It just wasn't. So that is something that we are seeing more and more. Again, though, those two diagnoses or supporting diagnoses co-occurring are secondary to the language basis. Sometimes we get the question of who is not a Carroll student, and I would say that our program does not best support students who have autism spectrum disorder, maybe have some behavioral challenges, and or the attentional challenge is really front and center, sort of more so than this language-based challenge. So thinking about this construct, I'd love to move ahead a slide and have us look at how our population breaks out by grade and by division. And what you'll see on the slide is this is the breakdown of our 455 students by division. What I don't have on here is that for all of these 455 students, we have about 160 odd educators. We are a highly customized micro-segmented universe where in subsequent slides, not yet, I'm going to kind of take you through the model of how we break this down so we can really give each child what they most need. What you'll notice here is looking at the lower school, let's start there, is that we start small in our BR, what we call our first graders, our beginning reader program, and second graders, we start small. But by third grade, we start to balloon out. My colleague Carroll Rumpler calls it the home plate, right? We sort of get kind of wide and a little fatter through the middle and then kind of plateau across the top at middle school. That is because with increasing dyslexia legislation and more awareness around dyslexia and learning differences, kids get diagnosed. By third grade, many people know. By fourth and fifth grade, many more parents know. And by middle school, we tend to sort of even out there over the 3 grades. Our upper school program, and you may be wondering, why are you a school with 2 8th grades? Our upper school is an intentionally small program that's designed for students who are new in 8th grade. What we found was in the past when we would have new 8th graders in our Lincoln campus, where those students were kind of on their way, they're on their last year, perhaps transitioning out, thinking about next school. So like merging onto a crowded highway, it was hard to kind of merge in all these new students. So we have 2 different 8th grades. We also have a 9th grade program as part of this upper school that is for new 9th graders. And at times we have a subset of kids who come from our Lincoln 8th grade over to the 9th grade. So I'd love to look ahead to the mechanics of actually how we do this, how we can possibly educate these 455 learners. So I would say, Renee and I were talking today, if this was easy, every school would do it. We do this with such intense focus and distinct expertise after all of these years, and we focus on the one type of learner. We have tens of thousands of alumni who can attest to this. And what we're looking for in admission is, do we have the program for the child you're here to learn more about our programming for? That's awkward, trying to say that naturally, it doesn't come out well. In any event, so what I'd love to do is take you through a series of visuals that show you what a traditional classroom might look like and how we differentiate here at Carroll in our groupings. So what you'll notice here on this slide is that we have a series of students in orange and a series of students in blue. The orange students represent traditional learners. Those are the kind of 80% of the population that language acquisition was far easier. The sound symbol correlation was made far easier than it was for those students in blue, who may be Carroll students, right? Those are the dyslexic students. And what traditional school models require is that these students in blue are interdispersed with the traditional learners. And then the educators of these cohorts have to teach to this disparate array of students, to the traditional learners, to the dyslexic, and any other diagnoses that may be in this pool. However, at Carroll, we think about this very differently. Moving ahead, just one slide. Thanks, Erica. At Carroll, what we do is we teach to this one type of learner, right? It says there, those intellectual, motivated students who have language-based learning differences. So we segment out these particular students with that kind of narrow profile that we have at Carroll, and we teach just to them. And so on the next slide, what you'll notice is that I talked about, we have 455 students, but they're not all exactly the same, right? Not all of you here have students with exactly the same strengths and vulnerabilities and challenges and lived experiences. So the admission team, the academic teams, they dig in and learn all that they can about each individual child. And you'll see the kind of gradations there. And those gradations will become useful to us on those next slides as I show you how we micro segment. So thinking about language groupings, this is how we group them. We divide them up by a variety of factors. I'm speaking with the head of the lower school language department today, and she was talking about how she looks at between 26 and 36 different variables, a lot of it based on what you've uploaded as part of the application process in determining these groupings. Like there's cognitive profile, there's areas of vulnerability and challenge, but also some social engineering around lived experiences and identities. At the bottom, what I've done is divide up what a typical fourth grade looks like, but Erica just popped up there just to understand that there are actually 10 different language classes for the 81 sixth graders. And we might have one grouping that's working really on fluency pieces, other groups working on comprehension, other groups working on writing. And we really go at students' areas of greatest challenge because we know we need to close the gap. One thing I want to make sure to mention before we move ahead is I've spent some time talking about testing. I'm throwing out a lot of terms, and I recognize, as with the admission team, that applying to Carroll is a labor of love. It requires a lot, not only in terms of the upload and gathering the materials, but there's an emotional investment in applying to Carroll. To make things a little bit easier, if you're here tonight and you've heard what I've said and my colleagues, and you're wondering if we might be the right place or not, I invite you to email if you've got an evaluation you want to just send. And Kristen, I know, has been popping different things in the chat, but to the admissions at Carroll School email. Thank you, Kristen. You're welcome to send us some testing ahead of time, and we can just kind of take a quick look, get on a phone call, send you back an email and say, yes, we think you should continue with the application process, or we're not really sure. Here are some ideas that we might have. So I also want to be clear that when we think about this 26 to 36 different variables, if we're really that careful, if we're really giving every child what they most need, these groupings are not going to make sense for math. So looking ahead, we regroup for math around, again, kind of skills, cognitive profile, lived experiences and identities. And we have small group math. You'll see that there's actually more sections in this fourth grade. And similar to the slide on language, we have about 10 groupings this year in sixth grade. Reconfigure those groupings every single year. We study this very carefully at the beginning with all of the uploads and everything. If we need to make a change early in the school year, mid-year in the school year, we make those changes. The groupings have to be right because we have to close the gap. It's actually, I'll say kudos to the academic team. We don't often have to do that, but we are very willing to be as agile as possible around these groupings because your education, your child's education matters. I would now like to pass this off to my colleague, Allison West, who's going to talk to you more about the design of the program, our targeted cognitive intervention program, and data-inspired instruction.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Hi, everyone. It's nice to virtually meet you. My name is Allison West. I'm the head of the middle school, and I'm really pleased to be sharing parts of our school with you tonight. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about our advisory groups as it complements where Stacy left off here. Our advisory groups at Carroll are also formed through that give each child what they most need lens. We really aim to create homeroom groups that will foster strong, supportive relationships. Our advisory groups meet at least twice a day, sometimes more, and they start their day together in morning meeting. Morning meeting is an opportunity to get ready for the day, to greet one another, to preview upcoming events, share announcements, and really just connect with one another and provide students with the support that they need. All advisory groups end their day during an NCLU period, and that stands for No Child Left Unorganized. And that is where the advisor works with students as a group and as individuals to make sure that they're growing and building in their executive functioning skills and that they're leaving at the end of the school day ready to tackle whatever homework they may need to, they may be responsible for completing that evening. Moving on to focus area and flex block, these are additional opportunities within our schedule to also or give each child what they need at a very deep level. These are blocks where we can really customize instruction around specific needs of each and every student. And so rather than having to pull a student out for a particular intervention, we really have this time carved out within our schedule so that we can target as needed. Every student at Carroll is assigned to a focus area class. So this is just built into their schedule rather than being pulled out and provided at an alternate time. This is our opportunity for students to receive really targeted instruction in an area of great need. It's sometimes can be referred to as a double dose of instruction. It's important for me to share that first and foremost, a student's decoding and fluency skills are considered because we really want to ensure a certain level of proficiency before we start to tackle other skills and other needs. And so what that means is that for most students, their focus area provides that direct, explicit Orton-Gillingham structure. And that may happen in a one-on-one setting. It may happen in a pair or in a small group. And as students gain independence and proficiency, and of course, we're constantly gathering data each and every day, assessing and evaluating efficacy, the focus areas can also expand to include instruction in oral reading fluency, to strengthen comprehension skills or vocabulary skills. We also have focus area classes that really work on developing written expression, and in some cases, even math. And so you might be thinking, how do we configure these groups? Well, our teams work really hard to carefully analyze all of the data that comes through the admission funnel and also the data that we gather internally. We have a very rigorous progress monitoring approach. One of our core principles is that we are diagnostic and prescriptive, which means that pretty much everything we do is offering us insight into a student's strengths and growth areas. And we are using that data each and every day to monitor, evaluate, and tweak as needed. So again, these are blocks, this focus area and flex block times really enable us to get at a very high level and really target discrete areas of need. And so those, I sort of took a little deep dive into some of those specific blocks, but just to take a step back for a moment to give you some perspective on the landscape of the design of our program. Technically speaking, for all of our math lovers out there, 62% of our program is really what we would consider hardcore academics. And you can see that represented in the darker blue slices of this pie, where we have structured language, those area classes I was just mentioning, math instruction. But the reality is, these kids can only spend so much time doing the hard things. And we really aim to be a complete school that also leverages strengths. So the rest of their time is really dedicated to what we identify mostly as areas of strengths for many of our students. And we often refer to these areas as their dyslexic advantages. Many of these areas come more easily to our students. They feed their gifts and their strengths, and students really enjoy spending time in those spaces. Hopefully what you can see here in this pie chart is that we really are doing our best to balance the student's experience with fun and opportunities to grow in their strengths. So times like history class and science, where they're doing engineering and design challenges. We have a social justice thread that really engages students in thinking critically. Our arts and music program, and our multis program, which also includes physical education and bounders. All of these are opportunities for students to either feed and grow known strengths, and more importantly, identify new strengths and gifts that we can then help foster and grow together. It's important that we share with you how we go beyond the academics, and how we really work to go deeper into the foundations of cognition. So while building our students' skills and strategies within the academics are obviously key to our program, and that's what brought you here with us tonight, we do go beyond that. Neuroscience has taught us that it's actually essential that we delve deeper into understanding the neurological foundations of why our students struggle. Um, the science of reading has sort of exploded in the last few years, and we're so fortunate that we've been able to really learn a lot over the time and over the research that's been done even directly here in the Boston area. And so we aim to identify the particular pathways that are creating some of those roadblocks for our students. And we aim to deliver targeted interventions that are designed to strengthen those pathways. These interventions, as I mentioned, are very closely connected to the latest brain science. Um, we have a partnership with MIT in particular, for which we are very fortunate. Um, the bottom line here is strengthening these cognitive skills really translates into better academic outcomes for our kids. So moving to the next slide, this shows this list here. These our students tend to have vulnerabilities in these areas listed, and that includes processing speed, reaction time, working memory, some aspects of executive functioning, visual thinking, and logical reasoning. And perhaps some of those terms are sounding familiar, because they often do show up in the neuropsychological evaluations. Um, we are super fortunate at Carroll that we have an intervention that is designed specifically to strengthen these cognitive skills in an effort to optimize our academic program and students' academic progress. And really, the best news is that we've been doing this now for over a decade, and we have tremendous data that supports the link between combining this targeted cognitive intervention alongside our research based academic interventions. I'm going to pause for a minute because we actually do have a video that explains it far better than I can. So please enjoy here.
What is targeted cognitive intervention? Bright, motivated students come to Carroll School with language-specific learning challenges such as dyslexia. These children share a similar learning profile. They struggle to read. But when we look closer, we've uncovered that there are underlying cognitive differences. Many of these students have weaknesses in one or more cognitive capacity, how their brains process, organize, and use information. Take the word bat. You probably just read that on the screen. Simple, right? But when we look at brain activity while reading that, you get a different perspective. Brain scans reveal so much going on. This is the reading network. It links visual recognition, auditory language, and executive function areas. Not only are these regions themselves crucial, but efficient communication among them is essential for one's ability to read. Think of it as a set of roads connecting important landmarks in the brain. When the road is narrow and full of potholes or backed up with traffic, it takes longer to get from point A to point B. When neural pathways are weak or underdeveloped, the brain's capacity to benefit from instruction is diminished. Armed with this data, we set out to find a way to optimize these cognitive capacities, to pave the roads and turn those pathways into superhighways. What was our solution? Targeted cognitive intervention. Remember our bright students with dyslexia? Their brains work incredibly hard to learn. We asked, what if we could drive faster communication between different brain regions to develop a stronger, more efficient reading network? Partnering with scientists, doctors, cognitive specialists, computer geniuses, and inspired teachers, we developed a training program to do just that, targeted cognitive intervention. TCI is a data-informed educational practice designed to strengthen the reading network in the brain. It includes computer-based assessments and games, regular progress monitoring, and teacher coaching tailored to help students build a cognitive toolbox that they can carry with them throughout their lives. TCI is built to work within a school environment alongside other academic classes. So how does TCI work? Prior to training, each student is given a pre-assessment to measure cognitive functions. Our software crunches the data and we create a cognitive profile for that student. The student is then assigned to a program based on their area of greatest need. In a classroom with a teacher, the student works on a set of activities that targets his or her specific cognitive weakness. Throughout the program, the software helps teachers monitor progress and provide individualized coaching to ensure that the child stays on track. At the end of each round of TCI, a post-test is given to determine which areas have improved. Reports are accessed through the platform by teachers who can use the data in different ways to understand and support each child's unique profile. Maybe you're wondering what results we're seeing. We're so glad you asked. In addition to helping us understand individual profiles, the TCI platform allows us to study data on a group level in order to discover exciting, large-scale trends and patterns among our population. One of the things we found is that improvements in reaction time are most strongly associated with word identification, which in turn is a major predictor of oral reading fluency, a child's ability to read a passage out loud. When we combine TCI training with Carroll's highly individualized reading curriculum, the results are astounding, even to cognitive scientists. Students are moving across percentile bands in oral reading fluency, a feat that many say is not possible. Why is this important? The ability to read fluently is crucial for academic success. Most exciting for us, as a school for children who struggle with dyslexia, is that we are significantly closing the achievement gap for our students.
Hopefully that gave you a little bit more context here on the impact that targeted cognitive intervention can have on our students. I'm going to take you now through a little student study here. This is Binny, and I'm hoping that at the end of this, you're going to have a better sense for how we use data to inspire instruction. And you heard earlier that Stacy mentioned that the ways in which we teach to a very specific profile of student. And the reality is, as Stacy mentioned, we have 455 very unique versions of that profile. And yet we strive to give each one of those 455 individuals exactly what they need in order to thrive. So I'm hoping to share with you an example of how we do this. Now, we do this by collecting data that tracks academic growth along with the data that helps us understand and define the student's cognitive profile. And by doing this, we can design an academic program that includes targeted cognitive intervention that really capitalizes on each student's strengths while also targeting that instruction to build upon their lagging skills. So, as I mentioned, this is my friend Binny here. He's now a graduate. I had the pleasure of teaching him in 7th grade, but here he is in 3rd grade. And to orient you to this chart on the right here, sometimes we refer to this as a spider chart. And what I want you to understand is that as this blob sort of grows out towards the outside of the web, that represents growth in skills. Each line of the web, each circle, represents a percentile band, with the closest to the center being the 10th percentile. So it expands out. Along the outside of the web, these words here represent the assessment tools that we use to collect academic and cognitive data. So, for example, at the very top, at what would be 12 o'clock on a clock, you can see elision, and that is a phonological processing task. For Binny, that was very underdeveloped. You can see sort of that blob is close to the center. And it was very underdeveloped for Binny in the 3rd grade, whereas segmenting sounds, which is right to the right on his chart, that falls solidly within the average range. And so, as an educator, this tells us that there's uneven development in his phonological processing skills, and that's going to require targeted, individualized instruction. And the same is true for both word attack and word ID, which we can see as we head into about the 2 o'clock range here. I'm going to draw your attention down to 6 o'clock, where we can look at some reading fluency. And we see that that actually represents a challenge as well, along with visual working memory and reading comprehension, which is likely a result of those decoding and fluency challenges. However, I also want to point out around 11 o'clock, you'll see listening comprehension there, and that is a notable strength. And I point that out because if we can identify that a student has really strong listening comprehension skills, then that can lead us to assume that when we see low reading comprehension skills, but also low decoding and fluency, it's not a comprehension issue. We really need to tackle and target the decoding and the fluency skills. If we move on and catch up with Binny in the 5th grade, we can see that the growth Binny has made is a result of that targeted instruction and all that careful attention to giving him just what he needs. So you can see that blob sort of growing here. His phonological processing skills are now fully developed, and we can see steady growth also in his word ID and word attack skills. Fluency, as you're probably noting, remains an area of need, and that's going to continue to require that targeted instruction, likely within that focus area class. Similarly, reading comprehension, although somewhat improved, continues to also require that direct explicit instruction. And then, oh my goodness, look at the EF, which stands for executive functioning growth. He developed strategies specifically for shifting his attention between tasks to become a more strategic attacker at problems. Another impressive point of growth to point out here is his visual working memory capacity. And as you heard from Stacy earlier, working memory is absolutely essential for reading. And while at one time it was believed that cognitive capacities are fixed and you just need to deal with it, all of the research has shown the power of neuroplasticity. And this data here is showing that. It's showing the growth in that working memory capacity. And so this is going to lead Binny to be able to continue to work towards greater academic success. And here we have Binny in 7th grade, but here we can see that by 7th grade, Binny's chart continues to grow, and it grows in these beautiful ways. And you can see that there's still variability throughout his academic and cognitive development, but our data shows he has developed a solid foundation. Many of these areas are falling at or above the 50th percentile nationally. And all areas fall within what is described as the average range. Fluency, as you can see here, remains an area of challenge for him. And I can share with you that throughout his 7th and 8th grade year, developing that fluency and automaticity continued to be a focus of targeted instruction within his focus area, and within his ELA classes. So I'm hoping that taking you through on this little journey with Benny from 3rd to 7th grade, you've been able to see that through that using data to help us design a really targeted and individualized academic program pays off in really beautiful ways. We've been able to help, in this case, Benny grow in some of his cognitive capacities and certainly across multiple academic domains. So I am now going to turn this over to my colleague, Deetra Watson, who will share some insight into the number one factor of student success, which you may find surprising.
Thank you, Allison. Hi, everyone. Allison has shared quite a big promise that we give each child what they most need to actualize impressive growth. It is so nice to be here with you all. I am Deetra Watson, the lower school division head. So you've probably picked up on our deep dedication to give each child what they most need to actualize their growth and progress in various ways. And this may have you wondering, what is the number one factor that contributes to student success? You might be thinking, is it motivation, work ethic, the impact of curriculum, or specific intervention? And while all of these factors are significant, many years of research have concluded that the number one factor in student success is the impact of the individual teacher. Carroll has a deep commitment to providing targeted, effective professional development that enables our faculty to teach our very specific population of learners. All 455 of them, as Stacy and Allison spoke about. Every Friday, students end their day at noon so teachers can engage in rigorous professional development. This process is continuous, so even the most experienced teachers never stop learning. We have several strands of professional development I'm going to talk you through. Every faculty member has a coach with whom they meet regularly. Coaches provide support and feedback, discuss individual student action plans, analyze student data, and develop curriculum. It's highly targeted. We host experts in the field. These speakers are some of the foremost experts in the country on dyslexia, executive function, and social emotional learning. And they help us enhance our pedagogy and grow as educators. All adults at Carroll, across all divisions and functions, participate in professional learning communities. We call them PLCs. Yes, we have an acronym for everything here. We use these PLCs to share expertise, build community, collaborate, and problem solve. For the past 6 years, our PLCs have been focused on topics and issues centered around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Finally, we are very fortunate to have a wonderful collaborative graduate program with Lesley University, where graduate interns learn firsthand from teachers in our classrooms and attend graduate classes taught by Carroll educators. There's so much more to share, but in the interest of time, I'm going to turn it back over to Stacy.
Thank you so much, Deetra. Thank you. I'm just going to take you through the next 3 slides. I'm going to try and speed us up here a little bit so I can hand it off to my colleague, Kristen, and get everyone in their breakout rooms. One functional thing I wanted to remind people of is that should you have any trouble getting into your breakout room, come back to this link. Erica Barros and Jen Brock are going to hang out for just a little bit in case anybody needs any help. Okay, back on program here. So I want to talk about GEC at the identity level. We've taken you through a lot of the academics and the teacher training and the targeted cognitive intervention, but we know we can only fully GEC when our lens accounts for cultural factors and lived experiences. And so from this perspective, we look at the whole child. Allison spoke about responsive classroom and advisories where we set culture and we get to know your students. We expect educators to be highly attuned in all domains of education and in building relationships and knowing and seeing your students. So what does this look like at the community level? This idea of belonging, right? Going ahead just one slide. 2 years ago, we embarked on a large scope and sequence, a study of perspective taking as an institution, recognizing that this was fundamental to our population for kids who came to Carroll feeling like educators didn't really know or understanding them, feeling like they couldn't build trusted relationships. Maybe some of our students had struggled with flexible thinking as part of their profile. So this element of perspective taking was so key for us. And we built upon that onto this idea of belonging, right? This building out of this diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And what does this look like in practice? We inspire our students to become analytical, to become more creative, to become problem solvers, and then even thinking kind of downstream to become artists, engineers, social workers, physicists. We encourage our students with their strong self-advocacy and we build their confidence so they can be anything truly. I mean, these sound like buzzwords, these sound like things people in schools say. I invite you to look at some of our alumni materials. It's very, very inspiring what actually happens with a really wonderful education at Carroll. So what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about some of the elements Allison touched on a little bit in the program, this idea of that we're a very complete school. So we have all of the academic components, right? And we have the social emotional pieces, but we also help to build out those dyslexic advantages, those talents and strengths. And we have massive opportunities beyond just the scope of the academics, right? Our program is both highly specialized, but very, and I don't love this word, but highly normalized. And I use that word just so you don't feel that this is such a departure from a traditional school experience. We have really wonderful after-school programs and enrichment programs. Deetra talked about how every Friday afternoon we turn into Carroll University. So we have robust Friday programming where the kids can go skiing or tubing. They can go apple picking to the aquarium. They can play paintball. We also, during the course of the school day, have clubs and affinity spaces, dozens and dozens of clubs. There are multiple opportunities for community service that are led by our students. And we also have things like talent shows and community values and beliefs and mottos and mascots. It's a highly rich experience that even though Carroll is a specialized learning environment, it feels very much like a complete school. So what I'd love to do now is hand it off to Kristen to talk a little bit about the mechanics of what's next. I do see that there are some questions in the chat about a neuropsych. You do need an evaluation, but I encourage you to connect with admission a little bit more on that. And then the other question was, yes, we are recording. This will be available later. Off to Kristen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Stacy. My name's Kristen Curry, and I'm the Director of Admission at Carroll. My admission colleagues and I are so thankful that you joined us tonight. In just a moment, I'll share a quick summary of the admission process, but first, I'd like to preview our next steps for this evening. When this session concludes, we'll all meet up in different breakout groups organized by grade. These are informal question and answer sessions where you can learn more about our programming at your child's grade level. If you've registered in advance, you may have a Zoom link to the next session in your email. If you haven't yet, not a problem. Please use the links in the chat to register now so that you'll be ready to join us there in just a few minutes. And now here's a look at our admission process. So we are now nearing the end of our information session, and we also offer monthly campus tours where you can come and see Carroll in action. Our next tours will take place on January 11th and February 8th. If you'd like to join us, please register using the link in the chat. It's also on our website. The next step is to submit an application through Ravenna, our online admission portal. The application includes a series of documents to upload, such as evaluation reports. Please be sure to complete all parts of the application and to click all the way through to that final submit button, because that's what allows us to view the documents. We're happy to help at any point along the way. Please reach out to us at admissions@carrollschool.org if you have questions. After we've received submissions to all items in Ravenna, the admission team will review your completed application. We will then reach out to you with next steps for your child. Please know that we have a generous financial assistance program. Should you be interested in this, there's a separate application process through a third-party processing agent called Clarity. We recommend that you complete this concurrently with your admission application. It's important to note that admission decisions are entirely separate from financial assistance decisions. We have different committees who oversee these separate processes, so you will receive your admission and financial decisions separately. So thank you so much for joining us. If you could please log out of this meeting and join your breakout room, we're looking forward to seeing you and engaging in more of a conversation.